Let's get into it then.
All right.
Awesome sauce.
I ask that the gods and goddesses of our respective paths bless this circle so that we may be free and protected within this space.
And if you have this one word, pagan or paganism.
For the pagan community.
Exactly.
The big umbrella.
And that was fucking fantastic.
Best
Of the year.
podcast ever. Hey! To
We're
each other.
three pagans
Exactly.
We're three pagans.
and a cat.
And may the works this day be of the highest good for all present and those listening. So mote it be. The circle is cast.
We ran as if to meet the moon that slowly dawned behind the trees, the barren boughs without the leaves, without the birds, without the breeze. Welcome to Celestial Bodies, the Moon, the 109th episode of Three Pagans and a Cat. Our opening today is courtesy of 19th century poet Robert Frost from his poem Going for Water. Thanks to Velocity Rose for our intro music. You can find more of their work at velocityrose.com. You may call me Ode.
You can call me Carr. I'm Ode's father.
Merry meet. My name is Gwyn, Ode's mother. And I love Robert Frost.
Yes,
Of course, I just love poetry.
it's got a good rhythm. Let's do our housekeeping.
Housekeeping! It's that time of the month.
Yep. Time for Carr to read
Ooh.
all the patrons.
Perfect to be on a lunar day.
And let me just say, as a person who doesn't experience that time of the month, I do feel like this is mine.
And of course, as everyone sit back, get a drink.
All right, we have 32 kittens.
Welcome to all of our kittens.
We love you, kittens.
Our cats are Anonymous, Beehive Coven, Bryn Johnson, Cabra, Cheryl, Christine Phillips, Christy Claxton, Cindy Barrick, Dale Harvey, Elisa Durka, M. Tulasavari, Felicia Hudson, Friday Cecilia Zollner, Gary Bearstorm, Jasmine Ray Bell, JT, Coney Briggs, Kai, Malks, Megan Sokolow, Michael Andanzio, Rebecca Hillman, Rhonda Graham, Sakura, Squiggy, Tiffany, Vivian Armstrong, and Zacchaeus.
Thank you. We love you, cats.
All right, our hunters are
Oh boy.
Here we go.
Air, Alyssa Addy, Anonymous, Amy Martin, Benjamin Walburn, Blondie, Briar Aldridge, Brittany, Charles Howison, Delilah Darge, Darby Lockridge, David Doshvin Keys, Elfwart, L, Emily Hall, Emily Miller, Emily Sukadowski, Finn Odinson, Haley Finley, Hojan Ko, Indigo, Yanni, Jax, Jace, Helmer, Jen, Jeremiah Keel, Jessica Glassbrook, Jessica Jones, Joe Frost, Juniper Shadowcat, Kate Goodmote, Kaylin Casey, Ken Hub, Kimberly Lockaby, Laura Loki, La Petite Poison, Laura Lani, Lee Knapp, Mackenzie Boyer, Megan Kipper, Megara, Melissa Gervin, Melkor, Meredith Kenton, Misha Magdalene, Nadia Ratchford, Nick Shepard, Alice Perch, Pablo B. Fordor, Ray Lothrop, Rochella Andashvid, Rana, Sarah LePage, Sarah Mims, Saranth Odinson, Scooby Sekalusu, Shannon Bednar, Sheila Bond, Silken Firm, Sky Poyfair, Sloth, Stephanie W., Stevie Thompson, The Pirate Cove, The Sugar Maple Seder, Usha Ursha, Victoria Selness, Zemeni Kokora, and Zachary Cornwall.
Wow.
Thank you to all of our many billions of hunters.
Many hunters. You know how much we love you.
Our leopards are Akaneko, Chris Colibri, Ellen Veals, Foxchild, Gemma Atkinson, Robin Archer, and Scubus.
We love our leopards.
Mm-hmm.
Our tigers are our Darren Summit, Kristen Gill, Crystal of Apothecary Teas, Elaine Glansberg, Alora Driver, Jim Two Snakes, Nick's Falling Leaf, and Tree Wizard Creations.
Thank you. We love you, tigers.
Our panthers are Allie Robinson, Dakota Wilmaquette, Elizabeth Bull, and QQ Ann.
And you know
Thank
we
you
love
to
our
panthers.
We love our panthers.
And our jaguars are Amanda Hicks, Justin Stanage, Kelly Burt, and Kirsten Ray.
We love our jaguars.
Yes.
That's all she wrote.
That could have been, yep.
It could have been a whole lot better, a
Yep.
whole lot worse. It also could have been a whole lot better, but
Okay, yeah.
There's the perfectionist streak.
There's the perfection. It's the rushing. I think it's because it's like, you didn't want to take too long, so you did the Mighty Mouse version of it.
All right.
and then there's a
Continue with
change
housekeeping.
coming
Yep,
to patron levels.
Yes.
that's right.
So this
There's
is
some
brand new
upgrade.
because there's something new
Right.
that has come out through Patreon.
Yep.
Besides the fact that you can now pay for a year at one fail swoop and
One
get it.
veil swoop?
Yeah, that's when you fall down as you do it. You can pay for a year all at one time.
Yep.
And you get a 10% discount on it by doing it that way.
Which
Yes.
is a brilliant way
Yep.
to offer that as a service.
Yep. And then the $20 level that used to include a painting from Ode,
Hypothetically.
Hypothetical painting.
because Ode is way too busy doing other things to have time to paint. We have a new one that's coming to that.
Yes. We're changing the perk for that tier.
Yep.
Yep.
So for that tier and above,
Which is leopards, by the way.
Yeah.
so leopards
and
and above, starting next week, will get the same service that you all currently get in the Discord listening to us live,
Mhm.
but they will have video.
Yes.
Yep.
So they will be able to watch us as we do this live as well.
Right. You get to see us talk with our hands.
You'll see our lovely bedroom
You get to
setup.
see when Gwyn, waves her hands too close to me and I lean away.
Or
And-
just all of our regular antics that you just don't see.
You know,
Right.
all those times when we try to describe to you what we're physically doing, you'll be able to see us doing those things.
That's
Yep.
right.
But
And-
we're not going to be, those are not going to be recorded as video
Nope,
on demand.
nope.
So you'll only see those if you show up live.
That's
Yep,
right.
exactly. It just shows up live. Anyway, so the other thing that we're going to do,
Right, the other change for
the
Yeah,
other
the other
change
change
that we're
for
making
Patreon.
is for
the next level up to $30.
Panthers.
The
So
Panthers.
Panthers level, which you were supposed to be getting
Sort of in
snippets
progress.
from the Building Your Book. Well, that's been kind of put on the back burner right now because
Gwyn
Gwyn is
doing-
writing another book on Green Earth Witchcraft.
Yeah, she's designing a whole tradition at
Right.
this point.
Because of that, what we are going to do for that level is that everybody who's $30 and up will start to get all of our notes
Yes.
for these episodes uploaded.
Production notes.
So
Yes.
all of our production notes. So you will actually get everything we have written down, even the shit we don't say.
Yeah. So you'll get to see the notes to prepare for these episodes. So
Yep.
it's just a little sort of fun behind the scenes kind of thing.
And it's going to be a weekly.
Right, yeah. That
Yep.
you'll
Instead of
get that
monthly.
every week
Yep.
because we do an episode every week.
Yep.
Right. And so that includes, like, Car's Feast Table, and Gwyn's Garden Gems, and Oatstone Corner.
When those segments
And,
air.
Yep, when
Yep.
those segments air, and also reviews.
Yep.
So all of that stuff will get uploaded. So that's the $30 and up. That's the Panthers level. So now that we have that decided amongst us,
Right.
that is also...
You're going to have to love it,
Yeah, you
suckers.
just gotta have to live with it.
Just going to have to live with it.
So, the other thing is that on every Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, we do a Zoom call that I host along with a plethora of other people
In the pride.
in the Pride. So, and some of them not in the Pride. Just come hang out. You don't have to be a part of the Pride. So if you're not listening to this, but you still find the Zoom call, that's fine. But if you're listening to this, you are a part of the Pride.
That's right.
So feel free to come by. I think we had 15 people today.
Yeah,
Including a special guest of Hejax,
Right.
which is
Our son.
our son, yep,
my
who
brother.
popped in. And then Gwyn does some shit too.
Yep, I
Talk
do.
about what you do.
On Monday mornings at 8 a.m. Eastern, I lead a guided meditation live on Facebook, on the Facebook page, but it also goes to the group and to my other Facebook pages, Gwyn of Three Pagans and a Cat, as well as Green Earth Witchcraft. And then on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern, although I did miss last week, so we'll be doing chapters 10 and 11. We are doing a book club, and we are going through the book How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi.
There you go. And then I would say also that Tuesday night,
Right?
this upcoming Tuesday night, myself, Saranth Odinson, and Malik Odinson will be doing the second Three Pagans on Tap, which streams live on YouTube and Facebook. So you can go to the Three Pagans on Tap Facebook page or the Three Pagans on Tap YouTube page, and it streams there on both of them currently at the same time.
The first episode was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think the second one's going to be even more fun.
Yeah, because it's whiskey.
Because, we're doing whiskey.
Oh,
So-
Star does like his whiskey.
And then just a reminder going out on the podcast that now, as of this episode, as of September, we have closed the Discord channels that were previously locked to patrons back down to being patron only. So
Yep.
the recording channel and the patron questions channel are now locked to Hunter
Hunters
and
and
above patrons.
Yep.
But the rest of the server is still open to everyone.
All right, that's it. I think we're
Yep,
house
we're
kept.
house kept.
And house swept.
There we go. So
What's the pagan version of that, or the heathen version of that?
I think house kept covers it.
So did I, but whatever.
Witches be contrary. What can I say?
Right,
Wow.
That was good. That was good. No, that was good. That was a good one. Support that.
All right, so we're talking about
We're talking about the moon.
the moon. Okay.
Yes. And I have some science to start with because the moon is really interesting.
Yes.
Sciencey.
I have science too.
Yes. Okay. So,
Probably the same science.
probably. Although
Well, I mean,
there's
science is science.
Science is science, but
And-
there's a lot of science about the moon, so we may
That's
focus
true.
on different things.
That's true. And Red is right when Red says science rules.
Yes, it does.
Yes, it does.
And bullshit doesn't.
We all love science here
We do
in
love
the
science.
3-pack pride.
And Rad says Bill Nye represent, and I did watch Bill Nye obsessively as a child.
Absolutely. Both you and Jackson.
We still watch Bill Nye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just on Netflix
Just
now.
on
Yep.
Netflix, yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so some moon science. It is the largest planetary satellite relative to the size of the planet.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah, so its density is a ratio of 1 to 81. It's like a quarter of the total size of the Earth.
And it is our only natural satellite.
Yeah, we have some near Earth
Mm-hmm.
objects that have like less stable orbits,
Mhm.
but the moon is our primary satellite.
Yep.
There are a few hypotheses, but there's one sort of primary hypothesis about how the moon came about, which is called the impact hypothesis, the giant impact hypothesis, or the Theia hypothesis.
Yes.
Because the theory is that there used to be a planet similar to Mars in size and construction that smashed into the early Earth
Mm-hmm.
and created this debris field that eventually
The moon.
became the moon. It
And
So it
eventually
just coalesced.
coalesced, yeah, and became the moon.
Interesting.
And just so you know, Theia is actually, in Greek mythology, the mother of Selene, who is the representation of the moon.
Oh, interesting.
So that's the general hypothesis, the most widely
Hell.
accepted hypothesis about how the moon came to be was
Yep.
that it was this impact. But recently they actually discovered that the moon is older than
Yes.
we thought it was.
By quite a bit.
By about 100 million years.
Yep.
So we originally thought that the moon was created, that this impact happened about 150 million years after the solar system sort of coalesced, came into being. But they've done comparisons on moon rocks. So what they've done is the moon rocks have different concentrations of minerals in them based on how and when they developed. So the different half-lives of these minerals, hafnium and tungsten. And unlike our planet, which is very geologically active, the geological structures of the moon haven't changed tremendously since they formed.
Yeah,
Right.
Very
So-
static.
Exactly. Very, very static, geological formation. So they've been able to continue studying moon rocks that were taken,
In
from
69.
from our very earliest
Right.
moon voyages.
Mhm.
And we now have technology that allows us to use, mass spectrometers and radiology and all kinds of things.
So they gave him to Abby.
Yes.
And well, the nice thing is that the science has gotten more
Has advanced,
sophisticated, gotten more advanced. So
and we
those
still have these collections of moon rocks that we're
Exactly.
able to continue studying. So they've done studies on this, and because of the rate of the half-life of the decay of these minerals and the different concentrations of them in the moon rocks, they've determined that the moon is about 100 million years older than we thought. This impact must have happened no more than 50 million years after the creation of the solar system.
Yep.
Which also helps us date the planet Earth,
Yep.
because obviously the moon couldn't have formed through this impact unless Earth as a planet had already formed.
Gotcha.
So it's told us some really interesting things about sort of the...
Wait, whoa. The Earth isn't only 6,000 years old?
No.
No, it's not.
Interesting. All right, cool.
And it's not just because God created it old.
Right. That was some interesting science that happened relatively recently.
It's actually been within the last couple of years that they made this
that they did this
determination.
dating. Yeah, so that's how we think the moon came into being. And it has this really interesting orbit with the Earth. So the moon has a synchronous rotation relative to the Earth, which means so you know how there's a light side and a, quote, dark side of the moon?
Yep.
Scientists prefer to call those the near and far sides because technically both sides do get light from the sun. It's just that we don't see the far
Right,
side.
yep.
That one side always faces us, even as it rotates around the planet.
Exactly, because of the synchronous rotation, and the way that the orbit is arranged, we always see the same side of the moon. But we actually see a little bit more than 50% of the moon due to an astronomical phenomenon called libration.
Mm-hmm.
There's a slight wobble in the moon as it rotates and as our position relative to it on Earth changes. And so we actually see about 59% of the moon's surface, and that's how it seems like larger and smaller in the sky.
Yep.
And how the phases and all those things work together. And so technically the far side of the moon, quote, far side of the moon, is smaller than the near side of the moon. We actually see more than half of the moon.
Because of the way it rotates.
Yeah, because of the sort of funky angles. And the gravity of Earth, actually, the moon is not a sphere, and neither is the Earth.
No.
Neither the moon nor the Earth are perfect spheres. They're actually elliptical oblongs because their gravity very slightly, because they're very close
Collapsing
together. Yeah, because they're very close together and very close in size. They slightly pull each other out of perfectly spheroid shapes.
Mm-hmm.
So they're pulled towards each other.
Mm-hmm. I also thought it was interesting, the little tidbit that I found was that it takes as long to rotate, the moon takes as long to rotate on its own axis as it does to rotate around the planet.
Yeah.
So I thought that was cool too. And I think
So a lunar day is like 30 days?
So
28 days?
So
basically.
There's actually a phenomenon called tidal acceleration, which, if it went on long enough, would create a month-long day where we would always see the moon at the same point in the sky, because the tides and the moon actually do have an interaction.
Right.
The moon sort of pulls the tides and creates the tidal bulge, but because of the way the orbits are arranged, the tidal bulge is actually slightly ahead of the moon.
Right.
And is accelerating the moon very, very slightly over time.
Interesting.
Because the Earth is sort of pulling the moon faster and faster around it. If that could go on long enough, eventually they would synchronize perfectly, and we would have a month-long day, and the moon would never change its location in the sky. But we'll never get there.
Right.
Because in about 5.5 billion years, the sun will become a red giant, and will vaporize the oceans, and so that tidal drift will no longer happen, and also the Earth will probably be consumed whole.
Exactly. The other thing I thought was interesting too is that the moon doesn't just control or have an influence on the oceans, the tide, the water tides.
Yes, the oceans.
But also the planet tides, the Earth tides. It's the crust of the Earth is also affected by the gravitational pull of the moon.
Yep.
So the moon's the reason why we have earthquakes.
No, that's a sort of. There's more complicated plate tectonics happening.
Yeah.
But yeah, it probably contributes.
It has a contributing factor.
And there are actually some models for considering the Earth and the moon a dual planet system rather than a planet with a satellite, because they're so close and because their gravitational effects on each other are so strong.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Are you done with science? Because
yes, I'm done with science.
I actually have a science thing that I know.
Ooh, that you just know.
That I just know.
Innately.
Yes.
Tell us your science thing.
The moon is actually moving 1.5 inches farther away from the Earth every year.
Yes. Yeah. So eventually its orbit will break from us.
Yep.
Although that, again, may be something that doesn't happen before the sun goes red giant and consumes the three closest planets.
But hey, I fucking knew something.
You did.
I know.
You did.
That's impressive.
That was very
for
good.
me. I mean, it may not be impressive for anybody else, but I was fucking impressed with myself.
One of the reasons why I'm so excited about the science, and I've always loved the moon. I've thought it was very interesting, but not that long ago, just a couple of weeks really, I wrote a blog post about the moon, and so I did all kinds of research on NASA and, various moon sites, and learned all this, the science
stuff,
about the moon, and you're like, oh my God, that's so interesting.
Yeah, the relationship between the Earth and the moon is really, really fascinating, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And it's had a huge impact sort of on how the mythologies have developed. So,
I was just going to say the same thing.
So, I think one of the most common, it's one of the most common paradolic effects, which is the tendency of humans to see shapes in things, is the man on the moon.
Yep.
Or the man in the moon.
Yep.
Or the rabbit in the moon in some Asian cultures. So that's an effect where people see like a face in the dark spots on the moon, which are called the Maria, which is Latin for seas, because the ancients thought that the dark sections of the moon were actually oceans. On the moon's surface. We've since discovered that the moon can't actually sustain water.
Nope.
Right.
Those are impact craters, if I remember
No,
correctly.
so there are impact craters on the moon. They're mostly smaller than the dark spots of the moon, but those are actually very, very large basaltic plains. That are thought to be a result of volcanic activity. So they do actually fill low cavities, I guess, but they're not craters. They're not like impact results. They're the result of
natural shifting
of volcanic activity, what's thought to have been early volcanic activity during the cooling process as the magma and debris from the original impact with the Earth forms the moon. And there are more of them, and no one's quite sure why. There are more mares on the near side of the moon than on the far side of the moon.
Interesting.
And there are a lot of theories about why that is. Some people think it might be related to the gravity and
between the Earth
and the moon, that for some reason it's encouraged this basaltic formation on the side that's close to the Earth, but nobody's completely sure why that happened.
Right. Well, I think it's safe to say, though, that the moon has had an impact on all cultures, because it's in the lore, it's in spiritual beliefs, it's in art, calendars, language,
Yeah, actually, they think the earliest calendars were lunar calendars.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's because the moon is depressed with how humanity has turned out. And it's trying to hide itself from us.
It's just filling in with black.
Right, yeah.
Filling its face, pulling a veil over its face. At this point, maybe.
What you're telling me is, A, the moon isn't made of cheese.
No.
And B, there's no man in the moon.
Well,
technically, no.
I mean, mythologically there are.
Right.
But the paradolic effect of seeing the man in the moon is just sort of a natural result of there being shapes and humans being inclined to perceive shapes as things.
Gotcha. Let's see, I've learned something new today. Really hoping it was blue cheese.
Blue cheese, I know. That would have been great, right?
Yes,
You would. It's important to note that most cultures, if not all cultures, have some deity that is
or a
personification of the moon, just like as they do the sun.
Yeah, it's very, very widespread.
Mm-hmm.
So we've mentioned this before, but although it's very common now in Western society to think of the moon as a feminine force, there are a lot of cultures, including Norse mythology, where the moon is personified as a masculine deity.
That was totally new to me, because I really have always felt more of a feminine energy from the moon and when I've interacted with the moon, but that could just be more what I was exposed to when I first started studying mythology about the moon, because it was Wicca-based.
Right.
And so that, it's entirely possible that's why. But now that I know that there are masculine representations of the moon, I try to incorporate that into
your sort of work and
my
understanding.
my work, my understanding when I'm honoring the moon. Try to remember Mani. But there's others too, because I have a list. I'm not sure which ones are female, which ones are male, but obviously I know the Greek, who is a female personification.
Right.
And that's Selene. But in China, it's Chango.
Right.
In Hindi, or the Hindu god or goddess is Chandra. Sin in Mesopotamia is a moon deity. Tsukuyomi is the Japanese moon god or goddess. Igaluk is Inuit. Ibis and Khonsu are the Theban representations of the moon. Inyanga is the Zulu representation of the moon or moon deity. And there's many, many more.
Right. Mani is the Norse one.
Yep.
What's the Celtic moon deity?
There are 3.
Ooh, tell us about them.
And it depends on where in Celtic lands you were.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, because that's... Celtic is a language group, not a people.
Right. So the Gaulish Celts worshipped Epona as the moon.
I think of her as
horse.
Yes,
goddess.
Also horses. And also co-opted by the Romans and eventually had a temple in Rome to Epona.
Interesting.
But yes, is also
moon-related.
Moon-related, yep. And then Araniud is the Welsh version.
Okay.
And which her name translated means silver wheel.
Ooh, that makes sense. I see it.
And her symbol represents the ever-turning wheel of the year. And then in Irish, it would be Carowin.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
With a cauldron.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. So,
So was the moon supposed to be her cauldron, or?
yeah, I mean, that was kind of the thought, right? It was a big
yeah,
round
got
thing
this
in the
big
sky,
round thing
right?
in the sky,
Right,
yeah.
that's not really bright.
Right, that would
Right.
be Carowin's cauldron.
Right, exactly.
That's very true. Now, of course, I'm familiar with the Greek, which the Roman then kind of borrowed from.
Right.
In the Greek, it's Selene is Greek goddess of the moon. She is, on her own, she is a representation of the moon, and she's the sister of Helios, who is the sun.
Right.
But she rises with a silver chariot from the ocean and travels across the sky, being drawn by 2 white horses, and it then goes back into the ocean at dawn. So I thought that was interesting.
And vice versa with Helios.
Exactly. And she also had a cult of followers. It was a small cult of followers who called her Mene, and that translated either to moon or month.
Yeah, interesting.
It was not a very large cult of followers, but that's how they referenced her. And then, of course, there were Artemis, Hecate, various other, Diana was the Roman. There were other deities that were associated with the moon. And so, like Selene, even though she was considered a sole representation of the moon itself, she was also a part of a lunar triple goddess with Artemis and Hecate. She was the full moon aspect, whereas Artemis was the waxing new moon and Hecate was the waning and dark moon.
Yep.
Interesting. I guess we can talk about the phases of the moon, because that's one of the big...
Whoa.
What?
This is a callback to episode number 1.
I know.
The phases of
Yes,
the moon.
we should probably talk about this. You may remember back in our very first episode when we thought we were gonna do a monthly podcast, and we were just sort of deciding what it would look like.
Or sound like.
We thought that we would every month talk about a different moon, because we had found like a list of worm moon and wolf moon.
Like, for instance, September is harvest moon is one of the designations.
Exactly.
Right.
So we thought we would talk about the different moons every month and talk about the phases of the moons and about super moons and blood moons and all that kind of stuff.
Super blood moons.
And then we immediately dropped that premise and never touched it again, and this is the first time we've done a moon episode since then.
So 109 episodes later.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
What if the greatest tabletop hero you ever played turns out to be yourself? In Vector, Attack of the Metapirates, move beyond imagination as Captain Vector and his Metapirates do battle from game world to world, following players from setting to setting in an attempt to enter the real world. Will you help Captain Vector in his Pinocchio-like quest to enter the real world, or stop him from becoming a living nightmare? Only you can decide. Vector, Attack of the Metapirates, can be purchased on drivethrurpg.com on a pay-what-you-want basis.
I think we should let Captain Vector have the moon.
Become a real boy, Captain Vector.
We can colonize the moon.
I'm behind that. I'm behind colonizing the moon.
We can't because it's too expensive to get water up there.
Or we could colonize the moon and let Captain Vector have Earth.
Also an option.
That
but
is
then
an
we have
option.
to figure out how to get the water.
It's the water.
Well, I think if we put Captain Vector in charge of getting the water to us.
Right, because the captain can just steal the water.
Right, yep.
And send it straight to the moon.
Exactly.
You know what? That's
true.
legit.
So
I think this works.
This is a viable solution.
and the moon is only for the pride.
Exactly.
There you go.
Pride moon.
Yeah.
Pride moon. I think that should be a new designation for the moon. Pride moon. 3-pack Pride moon. Of course, we do have the different phases of the moon that we are going to talk about right now, the lunar phases.
But before that, Ronna says there actually is water on the moon already. We just have to thaw it out. That is technically true. They've found some water embedded in rock way, way, way down deep. And they have found some ice caps at the north and the south. They're small and wouldn't last very long.
And Malcora says, let's hope that the microbes don't take us out.
That too. Okay, let's go into phases of the moon.
Okay, phases of the moon.
And you work with these things.
Wait a second.
I do.
Moon phases. Go ahead.
Nice.
It just came to me.
Nice. Okay, now I'm going to be singing that song for the rest of the night. There is, for me and for many people, there is the dark phase of the moon. Not everybody includes a dark. They combine it with new.
I feel like it's the same as the new.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people say. But the dark moon, it happens right before the new moon. It's the day before the new moon. So it's the very end of the lunar cycle as it's waning. It's obviously not visible. It is a time for rest, for purification, and for Hecatean witches, it's a time of devotion to perform the dipnon and to honor Hecate at that time. The new moon is the next day. It lasts 2 to 3 days. It is for, also, you still can't see the moon.
Right. Which is why I feel like they are identical.
But it is for beginnings, visions, dream casting, rebirth, new ideas, the start of new projects. It's the beginning of the lunar month, so obviously, or the lunar cycle, so that's why beginnings is what you focus on with the new moon. Then you enter into the waxing phase, which is when you start to see that first sliver, and then it continues.
Starts growing.
Yeah, as the first crescent and it starts to grow. That is, you draw things to you. That can be abundance. That can be building a business.
Anything that you want to increase.
Yes, anything. Growth, increase in mundane things, in spiritual things, in relationships. That is what the waxing moon is for. It's also good for education. For learning new things.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
For absorbing info.
Yep,
stuff like that,
as well as healing. And then you get to the full moon, which lasts 3 days.
But wait, before that you have sort of the half moon, don't you?
Well, yeah.
Some people do use the half moon.
I don't use the half moon. It's part of the waxing phase for me. But if you want to talk about the half moon.
No, I mean, I'm just saying some people do consider the half moon to be like a separate phase.
Yes, that's true. And then you've got the full moon, which lasts 3 days. You've got the day before the actual 100% full moon. Mm-hmm. Then you have the day of the full moon and the day after. All 3 of those days are the full moon. Considered the full moon. And that is when it is at the height of its energy. You can do psychic and spiritual work at that time. It is an excellent time to complete a spell, or a spell that really needs power, or a ritual that really needs power is done at this time. Or focus. This is also a time where there's good signal clarity for divination, or communication with spirits or with deity. This is a time when many people practice the drawing down of the moon, which there are 2 different thoughts on that. The first, drawing down the moon in Wiccan tradition and various traditions, is actually aspecting the lunar goddess, one of the moon goddess, or the goddess, drawing her into you and aspecting her power.
Wicca almost exclusively considers the moon to be feminine.
Yes. But then there's also other teachings of drawing the moon's energy. That's something I do.
Right.
You draw down that full energy to...
Right, which is not a possessory.
It's not a possessory experience. It is not connected to drawing down the moon as in the deity, as in the god or goddess. It is drawing in that energy to use in your spellcraft and your ritual and things like that.
It's sort of charging yourself with the moon.
Charging yourself with the full moon energy. And then after that, we have the waning moon, which is when the moon is starting to decline.
You move towards the crescent.
That's right. Then you begin to decrease. So it's about things that are decreasing and moving toward completion or release. This is a good time for banishing, binding.
Anything you want less of.
Removing. Closure, if you are...
Different kinds of healing.
Yes, different kinds of healing. Closure for legal matters or emotional matters.
Yeah, if you need to break up a relationship. Yeah. Especially if you've got like a problem that's been going on for a long time and you want it to wrap up, you could do it during the waning moon to get that sort of like, please wrap things up energy. So this isn't technically a phase of because then after the waning moon it goes back to dark and then.
Right.
But this isn't technically a phase of the moon, but there's also, an astrological effect called void of course.
Yes, void of course.
So.
It depends on who you talk to.
Yeah, so what the moon does astrologically is it pairs up with other planets as it goes through the month. So like it goes into the what's called the house of other planetary bodies.
Right.
And the relationship astrologically between the moon and those planets has different effects. But sometimes when it's traveling from one planetary house to another, or when it gets to the end of the planetary houses, there's like a gap, and sometimes it's a gap of like a few hours, and sometimes it's a gap of like a day, where the moon is called void of course, which means that it's not adjacent to any planets, it's not in any planet's house. And that's considered a time, and so it's not being affected by any planet. So that's considered a time when it's going to be more difficult to get things done, and like your energy might be not as focused because the moon is not focused on any particular planetary association.
So a lot of people recommend not doing any kind of magic at that time when the moon is void of course.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is the moon is a void of course, of course?
There come the dad jokes.
The dad jokes.
And also Rana points out the half moon really is the quarter moon.
Yeah, because you only see a little over half of the moon from Earth. Yeah,
exactly. So I don't personally worry about the quarters and things like that.
You just do waxing full and waning.
Yeah, I do waxing full, waning, and dark and new. So that's what I work with.
Yes.
And there's also some really good books out there about working with moon energy, moon spells. I cannot think of the author right now, but it's called Moon Spells.
Yeah.
And she's got 2 or 3 books in this moon series.
So we talked about the different correspondences for the different phases of the moon, but there are also just some things people generally consider like the province of moon magic, which I think the 2 main ones are cleansing and charging.
Yeah.
You always hear people talking about moon cleansing and moon charging.
Yep.
And again, I don't really do either of those things, but you do.
I do. In fact, the crystals that we're going to use to
ward our space,
our yard, is I cleansed them in the sun's energy and charged them in the moon's energy. And so what I did, first I washed them, so I cleansed them with water. And then I put them out in the sun to be cleansed by the sun's energy. But then on the first day of the full moon, I put them out, and luckily we had a nice
clear sky.
And so I went out there, I made a small offering of water to the moon. I had cleansing smoke and purifying smoke, and I offered smoke as incense incense as an offering to the moon, and charged those crystals
with moon
energy for their purpose, which is to be guardians and wards for the home.
I think that's really, really common. I think more people cleanse and charge with the moon than with the sun by far. And I think that's down to I think that probably comes from Wicca, because Wicca really seems to prefer the moon.
Yeah, there's a lot of moon lore and ritual built around, because in Wicca tradition that I'm familiar with, the moon is a representation of the goddess and the sun is a representation of the god.
Right, and Wicca doesn't really want that much to do with the god, they want much more to do with the goddess as a rule.
Yeah, there does tend to be more of a focus on the goddess.
Yeah.
That is probably where this concept and idea and practice of charging your stones or your whatever, your ritual instruments, charge them in the light of the full moon.
Now, bonus advantage to using moonlight to charge and cleanse stones in particular is that there are some stones which are light sensitive and will fade if exposed to direct or bright sunlight over time. So using moonlight, you are much less likely to cause exposure fading to your stones.
True. And also, there are certain times of the year, I don't know if this is the same in other areas, but I know that here in Michigan, there are certain times of the year, I'm sure it has to do with the orbit around the Earth at the time, but there are some full moons that are incredibly bright throughout the year. Not always, but they come down.
Some science on that.
Yeah, because there have been, like when I used to do ghost hunting, there were a few times we'd go out on a full moon and it was almost like it was midday. It was that poem, A Night Before Christmas.
Yeah.
It talks about the moon shining down on the yard as if it were midday. That's a true thing. That does happen depending on the time of year and whatever the science other conditions that you're going to tell us about. But I think that is part of the draw of not only charging your, whether it's your stones or your tools or whatever, in that moonlight, or yourself, just bathing in that moonlight. There's just this incredible sense of energy and peace, and there's a mystical charge to it.
So the surface of the moon is actually only about as reflective as worn asphalt.
Mm-hmm.
But because of the relative darkness of the night sky around the moon,
Mm-hmm.
because it is the only thing that is reflecting light from the sun, as opposed to stars, which are producing light very, very far away
Mm-hmm.
and long ago, it, like, your brain almost tricks you into thinking that the moon is brighter than it is.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And also I think it is interesting because we do remember that the moon is reflecting the sun's light. It's
Yes.
not
It
sending
doesn't generate its own
It
light.
doesn't generate its own light, but in a mystical sense, it generates its own energy as it's reflecting that light.
Right.
And so it also is combining the energy of the sun that it's light that it's reflecting.
Yeah, I think some people sort of understate the connections between the moon and the sun. They really are.
The sun is just as
Right. The moon
Connected to that.
The moon gets a lot of its power via the sun.
yes, absolutely. That's
So
why
it's a symbiotic relationship.
it really is. Yeah, we wouldn't have that light from the moon. We wouldn't have that energy the way we experience it without, I think, its connection to the sun.
So going back, Diane Ahlquist is
Thank
the
you.
author's name.
Yes.
And it's Moon Spells, Moon Magic, and The Moon and You.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also a Moon Spells journal.
Mm-hmm.
So those 4 are available. They're all available on Amazon.
Moon Spells is the one we have.
I have actually both Moon Magic and Moon Spells. I also have the third one. I'm not as, it's like a little, this is what you can do every day.
Like a little devotional kind of thing.
But it's not really a devotional. It's an activities book. You have to look at it.
Okay.
But it's a nice little book. But I felt like the Moon Magic and Moon Spells was more what I was looking for in that series.
In the Moon and You, there's a lot of like self-care.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
to do with the moon.
thank you.
Yep.
It's a self-care kind of
Yep.
deal.
Interesting.
So different things you can do, well, based on the phase of the moon, the phase of the moon that you're in.
Cool.
So,
And there are a couple of things that I would eliminate out of it, like there's some chakra talk in it and that kind of stuff.
there was, like, one of the activities, I think, it might have been during the full moon, I don't remember. One of them is like making a sandwich. I mean, it's that kind of stuff. But there's also some like, take a bath with
Do you at least make it a round sandwich?
Or make a bracelet, there's some, but there's also do yoga and, it's more about self-care.
I gotcha.
Based on the lunar phases.
Like inspired by the moon.
Whereas I really appreciated and enjoyed the Moon Magic and Moon Spells, even though she herself does not claim to be a witch. She's more of a New Age practitioner.
Yeah.
But she has discovered the benefit of spellcraft and magic.
Just so you know, she's also a consultant for Unsolved Mysteries.
Oh,
the new
the
show.
new one.
Yeah.
I really do like Diane. She's a good writer, and she's easy to understand, and she makes it very useful. Everything she includes in her Moon Spells and Moon Magic books are very practical, useful spells.
Rad. So we got kind of like a little impromptu review there.
Yes, we did. Diane Ahlquist, thank you for finding that.
That's it for the review.
One other thing I wanted to talk about was the moon in tarot.
Yes.
Because the moon is actually a tarot card.
Yes, it is. One of my favorites.
Well, before you move on to that,
Okay.
I have another commercial.
Yes, you do.
Yay.
So let me read that. Join our tiger, Laura Driver, with the music of Aqua Girl. Aqua Girl is an indie pop musician with a very chill, listenable synth tone, married to lyrics that are by turns hopeful and honest. All of Aqua Girl's tracks have their charms, but odes suggest Anakara, an upbeat track on connection and being upheld by others. You can find Aqua Girl at aqua-girl.bandcamp.com.
We're holy, but we're lost, and I feel you in the dark, energetic and unlocked. This is more than I ever thought, and I cannot imagine my life without you.
And we say it every time. I love Aqua
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
Yep.
Good music.
Good music. So listen.
I get to buy new tracks every time that
Yep.
I put a different one on there, and so I am developing quite a collection
Yes,
of Apple
yes.
Girls tracks.
Some people love the moon card. Some people, as like Streaking Fate says, they dislike the moon card. I think it depends on your perspective. I like the moon card.
So I guess first let's talk about meaning of the moon card.
Yes,
the general meaning
of the moon in tarot.
in tarot. So
Well, ask 3 practitioners, get 4 different responses.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Okay, cool.
there's that.
like there are general
Guidelines?
guidelines, yeah, because sort of the advantage of tarot is that there are
General
established
guidelines.
sort of keywords
Right.
for every card.
And like any other card, its
It's going to
interpretation
depend on your deck.
depends on where it is placed in the reading.
Exactly.
Question that's being asked.
Its relationship to the other cards. Yep. Yeah, so no card in tarot means one thing.
Mm-hmm.
But the sort of standard keywords for the moon
Mm-hmm.
are intuition and self-deception.
Illusion.
Yes. And I think those are really interesting parallels, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's so easy in both directions to mistake which one you're looking at, right?
Right.
Like, if you think of yourself as very intuitive, it's easy to sort of lead yourself in the wrong direction. And so one of the standard symbologies of the moon card from the Rider-Waite-Smith deck that you see reflected in a lot of other decks is that there's the moon at the top of the card, and then there's an ocean and the reflection of the moon in the water. And the idea is that if you're following the actual moon, you're following your intuition. But if you're following the reflection of the moon, you're following self-deception.
And it takes discernment to know which
To
one of
know
those
which
you're
one
following.
you're looking at, yeah.
And I know that I've often read the moon as being a card of dreams as well, whether it is chasing a dream or dreams that you're having or things like that. But again, that falls into that. Is it intuition or is it illusion? Are you following your dreams or are you being fooled by them?
And the other, sort of the flip side of that is if you don't listen to your intuition, if you convince yourself that your intuition is faulty or that you're making it up, then you lose important, valuable discoveries. And sometimes that can be about, like, not paying enough attention to your dreams. Sometimes it's, like you meet someone and you get just a bad feeling about them and you try to push it off and be like, no, I'm sure they're
Trying to
fine.
give them the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, and then later it turns out, actually, my intuition was correct and I should have paid attention to it sooner.
Or you're in a situation where everything is rosy colored glasses.
Yeah, exactly. So it can go in both directions. It's not necessarily that like one is better than the other.
Nope.
It's that they're sort of mirror images of each other, and the struggle with the moon is discerning the difference between them.
Yep.
And I think that's just such a really interesting parallel because the moon sort of in general is perceived as sort of an emotional force or an irrational force, which I think may also partly have to do with its relationship to tides, because we think of water as being very emotional.
Right.
And it has this pull on tides and moves the oceans. And then it's also got the phases where it's very inconstant. So people tend to perceive the moon as being really flexible in a way that other astrological bodies are not. Has that been your experience?
I think so. It is considered, the other light in the sky. It is you have the sun and you have the moon, but just as in the moon, in the tarot is a reflection of itself.
Right. You see the reflection of the moon, in the water.
The moon's light
is itself a reflection
of
the sun. So you're really looking at multiple layers of reflection happening.
Exactly.
But one of them is like behind the card.
So it really does depend, especially in tarot. It really does depend, again, what the question is, what the energy of the reading is, what the placement of the card is in relation to other cards.
And in relationship to your spread.
In relationship to your spread. And I think the moon tends to be one of those cards where people aren't sure if they're happy that it's in their reading or not.
It can go so many ways.
It can go so many ways. And I think that's what it makes it kind of scary for some people.
It's very flexible. Like, you get a tower.
Exactly.
You pretty much always know what a tower means in a spread, right? Like, where it falls may influence what part of your life is about to have a tower episode, but you know what a tower fundamentally looks like.
Yes, exactly. Like the devil or the death card.
Right.
Those are rather
straightforward. Like, where it falls will affect what part of your life it's going to impact, but you can predict what it means.
But the moon can hit any aspect of your life.
The moon is so flexible and can mean so many things, regardless of where it falls in the spread. In an interesting parallel, it's much more down to the intuition of the reader.
It is.
Than it is. So to read a moon card, you gotta access some moon.
You do. You have to access that energy of the moon, that intuition, and also be connected with your client or the querent.
Your querent. And your deck.
And your deck. You have to, so that you can interpret that card and know, what are you getting, the reality or the illusion?
Or the illusion.
So your whole conversation has reminded me of the Blondie song, One Way or Another.
One way or another, I'm gonna find you. I'm gonna get you one way.
Yeah, so, but like, if you know that whole song, it really is that.
Yeah.
You know, even the very brief, non-choruses of the song. I wouldn't even call them verses because they're really not.
Yeah, and they're saying 3-Pack the Musical, yes, 3-Pack Karaoke. You guys finally, after almost 3 years, got to hear us really sing all together at once.
Finn says, I would rather see the tower than the moon any day. And I think that's how a lot of people feel, yeah.
That is how a lot of people feel.
Just because it's a more concrete, comprehensible meaning.
Because of the nature of the moon, there is that uncomfortable flexibility.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. But I like the moon. I like the moon card. I do not fear the moon card in my readings. I like seeing the
moon card even when it means self-delusion, because then I can be like, oops.
Yep, exactly. Because
there is somewhere I am lying to myself. I had better figure out where.
Exactly, and I think that's important to be able to tell the person that you're reading for, if it comes up in their spread, that you need to be able to say, okay, listen, there is something that you may be being deceived on, either by yourself or others.
My experience with the moon is usually self-deception. There are other cards, like the Seven of Swords, that usually means deception by an outside party. But in my experience, self-deception is almost always the moon.
Yeah, that's very true. Well, I was going to talk about moon gardens and gardening by the phases of the moon, which I have talked about gardening by the phases of the moon before, but I thought I'd touch on that again. All right, moon gardens. They are really beautiful, and they are flowers and plants, foliage, that are enjoyed by the light of the moon. And they are flowers that are white or very lightly or silver colored, and they are night blooming.
Yes.
Which is so cool. So, the various flowers that you might consider for a moon garden would include moonflower, mock orange, night blooming jasmine, petunia, sweet autumn clematis, white bleeding heart, hydrangea, and lamb's ear. And several of those, if not, well, maybe not all of those, but a number of those are very sweet smelling flowers. So not only do you have these beautiful white or silver blossoms that shine in the light, especially when the moon is full, but you get that sweet scent in the yard as well. But there are also blue, silver blossoms and variegated foliage that you can include in a moon garden that include silver mound, which your granny had.
Yes. It is a silver mound.
It is a beautiful plant. Its technical name is Artemisia schmidtiana, and it is
it's a big silvery shrub.
It's a shrub, but it is
kind of low lying.
It's low lying. It looks like a mound, and it has a silver tone, kind of a silver blue tone to its leaves, and it is technically it's an evergreen.
It's sort of the same silvery color that mugwort is, if you're more familiar with
it. And then, Artemisia, it is in that same family. And then you've got blue fescue grass, which is an evergreen grass with kind of a blue-green tint on its leaves. You have juniper shrubs, again, another evergreen, and hosta, variegated hosta. Variegated, what that means is that there are patterns, streaks, or edges in white. So
on the
green leaves.
Yeah.
And so hostas, any of the variegated forms of hosta make an excellent addition to a moon garden.
That's a good call.
Now you want to plant your blooms, especially the ones that are blooming or have a really beautiful scent, at various times.
Mm-hmm.
So like when you're planting your moon garden, you want to know when they're going to bloom, and then have them stagger throughout the season so that they're not all blooming at once and then done,
dying,
but they're slowly opening and blooming throughout the season.
Right.
You want to plant them where they will enjoy maximum exposure to the lunar light. So that means most of them don't need shade. They need to be out where they can get full sun, especially because they're
full moon.
And then full moon. And they did say for those, for the aesthetics, for those nights when you have either a dark moon or you're waning or waxing, you can put out those little solar lights around your garden.
Oh yeah, to just kind of
to highlight the white gorgeousness, the vibe of your moon garden. Moonflowers and other flowers like moonflowers, they do need a full day of sunshine in order to be able to bloom at night.
Yes. We're thinking we might be able to build a moon garden in our yard next year. If we can just keep the squirrels out.
That's right. We are going to be doing raised beds next year.
Yeah,
so
we have lots of plans.
We may do this with our moon garden as well.
Mm-hmm.
But, and then I wanted to also touch briefly again on the planting by the phases of the moon.
Mm-hmm.
I did do that
way back in the day.
Way back on one of my Gwyn's Garden Gems. The idea, technically the idea is that seeds will absorb more water during the new to full moon phase, when moisture is pulled to the surface by the gravitational forces of the tides. And so there are important times for planting between the new and the full, and then between the full and the new. So those are the times you plant. Now there are certain types of plants that you plant during those times. So for the waxing phase of the moon, you would plant your annuals, your fruit and vegetables that grow crops above ground, like corn, tomatoes, peppers, strawberries, any of those types of above ground things. For the waning phase, you would do flowering bulbs, biennial and perennial flowers, vegetables that grow crops beneath the ground, like onions, leeks, potatoes, and carrots, things of that nature. That you plant during the waxing phase, because the idea is that the gravitational pull will help the roots and the tubers to grow.
So you're saying we should plant by the light of the silvery moon.
Not the sun, but the moon.
Right. And so that was great for your mom, but great for you in that same song. That was originally recorded by a guy named Billy Murray, and you can hear his music in BioShock.
See?
There you go. Some classic BioShock.
I love that.
Which, by the way, takes place under the ocean. There's the moon tides connection.
I love
I have made dual connection tonight. I feel like I've accomplished, I'm done with the podcast. I'm not going to do it anymore. I've managed to accomplish everything I needed to do. And so my life is complete.
So, do you have anything else?
As far as the moon goes, I don't think so. I mean, other than just to encourage people to, first of all, learn the science about the moon, because it's fucking fantastic.
The moon is very cool.
The moon is cool, y'all. So learn what you can about the science, because there's a lot of science that they have at NASA and various websites.
Yeah, and there's all kinds of stuff that we need Lagrange points.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah. So there's some really
so many interesting things.
Just astronomy facts about the moon.
Exactly. I mean, think about ancient Celts and their monuments that are lined up because of the moon.
The moon and the sun and everything.
All those
astrological
things.
Yep.
The other thing is study the moon magic. There's a lot to be said about working with the moon if you feel drawn or called to work with the moon and the sun. I feel like it's important to work, because obviously as part of the tradition I'm creating is to work with the earth and the moon and the sun, because they work in concert together.
Which we will be doing a sun episode coming up soon.
Right. So, find out what those various legends and mythological stories are about the various deities, because there's a lot of them.
Oh,
there are so many, and it's so interesting to hear how the various cultures have brought the moon lore into their language, into their calendars, into their belief systems.
Well,
it's fascinating.
And just sort of interesting tidbit, but in a lot of mythologies, the moon in particular, but sometimes the moon and the sun, were both originally people who were cast into the sky for one reason or another.
Exactly. So just do some of that extra research. It doesn't have to be your pantheon. Look into others. Branch out. Find out about other pantheons.
And then you'll find surprising connections.
Exactly. Like, as I said before.
And you may find surprised connections as well. When
That also.
a god from that pantheon goes,
hey, I noticed you were researching my thing.
Me and Diana.
Exactly.
I'm now going to be working with Diana. So, that was an exciting new development in the last week. But so yeah, there's a lot you can learn about other pantheons, not just the ones that you know specifically or work with specifically. You know, branch out.
Yep.
But then also go to, if you want to do a moon garden or garden by the phases of the moon, which my grandpa did, then go to the Old Farmer's Almanac.
Yes.
That's where you find the information about planting according to moon phase.
The old classic traditional farmer's almanac.
Yep, and you can do that. They have they have an Old Farmer's Almanac online. They have a .com. So go check it out.
So there's actually two Farmer's Almanacs.
Yes.
There's the Old Farmer's Almanac and the Farmer's Almanac.
And I tend to go to the old.
Both of which are fucking old.
Yes. Yeah, no.
So,
the farmer's almanac isn't like new.
Right.
Yeah.
But both of them have very good information, though slightly divergent information.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is why maybe it's because that's what my grandparents went through.
Probably is. You have an irrational preference.
I have an irrational preference for the Old Farmer's Almanac because that's what my grandparents used.
I actually like the new Farmer's Almanac, although, again, not new. Yep. But that's the one I grew up with.
Go check out both.
Yeah.
You Google Farmer's Almanac and Old Farmer's Almanac.
Yep.
And you can find out the differences and find out which one you prefer or use both. Because there's wisdom in both places.
Yep.
Yeah, and making comparisons between them could also be really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Like this winter, depending on which one you read.
Right. Could be either
great
or awful.
Yep. Exactly.
That is very true.
Here in Michigan, anyway.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
So yeah, other than just encouraging people to branch out a little bit more and do some magic and have some fun, that's all I got.
All right, that's all I got too. So I think we're ready to wrap up.
So that's it for this episode of Three Pagans and a Cat. You can find us on Facebook, on Three Pagans and a Cat on the page, and on a group. You can also find us on Twitter at 3_pagans. You can find us on YouTube at Three Pagans and a Cat. Or you could just frickin' Google us and find everything.
And don't forget, we do have a Redbubble that has some really cool stuff.
We got a Redbubble. Gwyn has a Pathos Pagan blog.
I do.
Car has 3 Pagans on tap.
Yep.
I also have a personal YouTube.
Yep.
That's Gwyn Inyon Brigid, or just, Gwyn of
Right.
3 Pagans and a Cat.
And so people understand it's Gwyn GWY.
Yeah, if you search GWEN, you will not find Gwyn.
Yes.
Gwyn GWYN.
Yes.
Gwyn.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Like Gwyneth.
Yes.
It's a shortened version of Gwyneth.
Yep. So
mm-hmm.
new stuff coming, weird stuff. Mm-hmm. You could see some random weird shit pop up at some point. You just never know.
You never know.
So pay
What
attention
we'll
to everything. Yep.
We are whimsical like the moon.
Right.
That's right. Are we real or are we an illusion? That is the question.
Or are we Memorex?
I knew that was coming.